The 2026 Formula One season hasn't even begun, and yet the sport is already facing its first major storm. At the center of it all is Mercedes, a bold piece of engineering and a regulation that may not be as bulletproof as the FIA believed. If the whispers coming out of the paddock are accurate, this discovery could tilt the competitive balance before a single light goes out. Here's the story unfolding behind closed garage doors. Mercedes is rumored to have unlocked a power unit concept that uses thermal expansion to push engine compression beyond what the rules were designed to allow. On paper, the compression ratio limit is set at 16.1, down from 18.1 in the previous engine era. But sources claim Mercedes has found a way to reach that old 18.1 figure once the engine is fully up to temperature, while still reading a perfectly legal 16.1 when inspected by the FIA under static conditions. The potential gain? Somewhere between 10 and 15 horsepower. In Formula One terms, that's worth roughly a quarter of a second per lap. In a sport where championships are decided by hundreds, that margin is massive, especially before anyone has even turned a wheel in competition. So how does this supposedly work? The compression ratio measures the difference between the largest and smallest volume inside a cylinder as the piston moves. Increase that ratio and you increase pressure in the combustion chamber. More pressure means a stronger explosion. Stronger explosion means more power. That's exactly why the rules cap compression at 16.1 to keep performance in check and costs under control, especially for new manufacturers entering the sport. But there's a loophole. The FIA measures compression when the engine is stationary and at room temperature. Normally, once an engine heats up, everything expands: the block, the pistons, the connecting rods, and in most cases, that expansion slightly lowers the compression ratio. Teams report that a static 16.1 reading typically drops to around 15.4 once the engine is running at full temperature. Mercedes has allegedly flipped that behavior on its head. Their connecting rods are said to be made from materials that expand more than the surrounding components. As the engine heats up, the rods lengthen, pushing the piston higher at the top of its stroke. That reduces the combustion chamber volume and drives the compression ratio up. What measures 16.1 in the garage becomes something closer to 18.1 on track. It's a stunning piece of engineering, and it's thrown the paddock into chaos. Ferrari, Audi, and Honda have reportedly filed complaints with the FIA, demanding the concept to be outlawed before the season begins. Their argument is clear. Even if the design follows the letter of the law, it completely undermines its intent. The compression limit exists for a reason, and Mercedes has found a way around it without technically breaking the rule. The FIA, meanwhile, is walking a tightrope. Their official position is simple. If an engine passes the test using the prescribed method, it is legal. Without proof that the 16.1 limit is exceeded during static inspection, there's no basis for punishment. Performance observed on track, no matter how suspicious, is speculation, and speculation isn't enough to hand out penalties. A meeting has been scheduled for January 22nd, bringing together all power unit manufacturers and the FIA, but expectations are low. Reports suggest the discussion will focus on creating dynamic measurement methods for future seasons, not rewriting the rules for 2026. The engines are already designed and homologated. Changing the regulations now would cause massive disruption. Interestingly, Red Bull Powertrains appears to be operating in a similar space, though perhaps not as aggressively. Red Bull Powertrains director Ben Hodgkinson has brushed off the controversy, insisting their power unit is fully legal while admitting they're working right at the edge of what the rules allow. That calm response is revealing. Red Bull wouldn't be this relaxed if Mercedes had discovered something they couldn't replicate. And that connection isn't accidental. Over the past few years, Red Bull Powertrains has recruited heavily from Mercedes, bringing in engineers familiar with the Brixworth way of thinking. When people move, knowledge moves with them, and it seems some of that knowledge may include this thermal expansion concept. That leaves Ferrari, Audi, and Honda on the outside. They don't have the solution, they don't fully understand it, and time is running out. The season begins in March. Far too soon to redesign critical engine components, even if the metallurgy could be cracked overnight. Mario Andretti, now advising the incoming Cadillac team, offered a telling perspective. Despite Cadillac using Ferrari power units, Andretti praised Mercedes and Red Bull for their creativity. He likened the situation to legal interpretation. Some lawyers are better because they know how to operate right at the edge, hovering in the gray before it turns red. In Formula One, engineering works the same way. The only question now is how far is too far, and who decides when the line has finally been crossed. Andretti also made one thing very clear. It's already too late. The engines are built, the designs are locked. Asking manufacturers to rework their power units now would be both impractical and unfair, especially to teams who interpreted the rules in good faith and committed to their designs months ago. And this isn't new territory for Formula One. The sport has been here before. In 2009, Braun GP showed up with a double diffuser that exploited vague wording in the regulations and dominated the early part of the season. Rivals eventually caught up, but the damage was done. Ferrari's F-duct, Mercedes' DAS system, endless flexi-wing interpretations. F1 has a long history of teams living in the gray areas of the rulebook and often thriving there. The flexi-wing comparison is especially telling. Technically, every car on the grid exceeds the wing flexibility limits at racing speed, but the FIA tests are conducted under loads far lower than what the cars experience on track. Because everyone bends the rule in the same way, it becomes almost impossible to enforce. This engine situation is different. Not everyone has cracked it. Mercedes and Red Bull appear to have the advantage. Ferrari, Audi, and Honda do not. The FIA does have a safety net built into the 2026 regulations, but it's far from perfect. It's called ADIO, Additional Development Incentive Opportunities. Every 5 or 6 races, the FIA will review manufacturer performance. Those falling behind can be granted extra support, funding beyond the power unit cost cap, additional dyno hours, and even the chance to re-homologate certain components mid-season. The problem is timing. ADIO only comes into play after several races. If Mercedes starts the year with a meaningful engine advantage, they could build a commanding points lead before any balancing measures are activated. And even then, there's no guarantee that extra money or testing time can close a gap created by a fundamental design breakthrough. The politics only complicate things further. 6 of the 11 teams on the grid use either Mercedes or Red Bull Ford power units. That's not a coincidence, and it's not a small voting bloc. Mercedes supplies its works team and multiple customers. Red Bull Ford powers both Red Bull Racing and Racing Bulls. Together, they hold significant influence,